Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of the Political Vigilante. I make it sound like a sitcom where somebody gets pregnant. But I'm here again with our resident MMT expert, Jeff Epstein from Citizens Media TV. Jeff, how are you?
I'm good. Not an expert. I'm an activist, a good activist, but it's an important distinction. But it is very nice to see you. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Our resident MMT activist who has opened me up to this whole world. And what we're going to do today is going to be kind of interesting. Jeff and I are going to talk for a little bit, and then he's put together an hour kind of updated, very much more informed video that he's going to be putting out for everybody. And we're going to go through it, and I'm going to ask Jeff questions and stuff like that. So I really appreciate everybody tuning into this. And of course, supporting what I do here, please go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood. And East Coast comedy progressive comedy tours coming to the East Coast, June 12th through the 19th. Ron Placone and I, the 12th we're going to DC, the 13th Baltimore, the 14th, 15th Philadelphia, which you will be at. So if you come to the shows in Philly, you can get some one-on-one, face-to-face MMT questions.
I will be there with guitar in hand to sing Ron's theme song.
That's right.
And I will be there with I'm going to be there both nights. And I'm going to also be there with MMT flyers for progressives.
So that's a great thing. So that's the 14th, 15th Philadelphia, the 16th we're New Haven, Connecticut, 17th New York City, and the 19th in Boston. That's one of the things about coming to a progressive comedy tour show is it's not just Ron and I each doing 45-minute comedy sets. We have organizations like DSA has shown up at our shows, Green Party, Movement for a People's Party, and a lot of progressive organizations. So if you don't know much about MMT and you're in the Philadelphia area, I suggest you come to one of those Philly shows because Jeff will be there with information. It can get you more involved and aware of this whole MMT thing. So Jeff, let's go into it was about a year ago that you reached out to me and said, Graham, I love your message. Here's an area that you would help your message in terms, because I always talk about a Green New Deal and why are we spending money on war and all this stuff like that, and you really sort of opened my mind up to that. So let's discuss that for a little bit.
Yeah, actually, I want to clarify expert versus activist. I just want to make it clear. I learned this. I never heard of this before February of last year.
Okay.
So it will be years, if ever, that I am an expert.
Sure.
So the experts are the economists and the scholars. A very important distinction. I don't want to pretend that I'm an expert. But yes, and I also want to say that the person who introduced it to me, MMT to me, will also be there on the first night of the show as well. So we're going to be doing that together. Yeah. 11 months ago, the day after AOC beat Crowley, that was the day that I gave you you were the first person that I ever introduced MMT to in public. I have a soft spot. It was a really special experience with you. Lots of light bulbs, and I that's never going to be reproduced. But I do want to be clear. I think, although it's good in its own way, it is good. I think tonight, if you compare, I think you and your viewers are going to find that this is a lot more in-depth and professional. This is the second version. I gave the first version at an economic conference last year. This is a totally new version. So even though the concepts are generally the same, I'm hoping that you're going to find it more interesting and more, so we'll see.
Yeah, and I think as we get into it, you're getting the message way more succinct and relatable, because it seems like a big meal to swallow at first. And I think the fact that you're simplifying it, because as you said, we all have been raised thinking that this is how the economy works, and now you're telling us this thing. So it's very much a Matrix moment of like, wait, what? So and to the viewers here, because I know, in that time my viewership has doubled in this 11 months, which is fantastic. So I know we have a lot of new viewers to the show. And I've put all my MMT, I have a playlist, an MMT playlist. So anybody watching for the first time that wants, there's great interviews. You hooked me up with Fidel Kaboub and other people that you would probably call experts in this.
Stephen Hale. Oh, they're absolutely experts. Yeah,
Yes.
PhD economists. Yeah.
Yeah, they're PhD economists. So folks, if you're just new to the channel or new to the MMT world, let this be your gateway drug into the wonderful world of MMT. So,
yeah, and actually, I'm proud to say Stephen Hale watched my entire presentation and asked me to do a few important corrections. A month before the one we're going to watch, he asked me to do a few small corrections and gave me his stamp of approval that this is MMT. So I'm happy about that.
Fantastic. So a PhD economist has approved the message that we are about to watch. Anything else, Jeff, before we get into this?
I expect significant skepticism, and that's great because we've grown up with that this is opposite world. So you should do your homework. I'm going to give you like 3 links to put in the description because it's really hard to distinguish between hit pieces and actual information. Just like Bernie is disruptive, and there's a lot of hit pieces about Bernie, same thing with MMT. It is disruptive. And so there are a lot of hit pieces about MMT, and it's impossible to know the difference between real information and hit pieces, to be honest. Basically, the hit pieces don't have anything from MMT experts or economists or scholars. No. But so I'm going to give you a few links to get started, so people can do their own homework and decide for themselves. I said it 11 months ago. The truth is, whatever the truth is, I believe that this is it. But people should be skeptical.
Great.
So, and then that's it. Please interrupt. Please try and express that skepticism that you think your viewers are going to have, and we'll do what we can. And I'm also going to give you, when I release the full video, not this conversation, but the original video, I'll give a link to that. And also I'll give a link to the slides.
Great. All right, guys. So here I'm going to move Jeff. We're going to do a little technical stuff. I'm going to move Jeff over here. All right, Jeff. So what we'll do now is I'll play the video and I'll just chime in with any concerns that I have or questions or skepticism, and you can just answer as we go. All right?
For coming. Let's get started.
Thank you especially to Kim and Ambrose for hosting this. My name is Jeff Epstein. This is an introduction to modern monetary theory, or MMT. Oh, and I should say, I'm normally hosted by Our Revolution South Jersey.
When are we going to get serious, Candy, about the debt?
We got to deal with this big long-term debt problem, or it will deal with us.
But it's very simple. The government works like your house works. Our government has promised far more money than it actually has or probably ever will have.
We have to reduce our deficit, and we have to get back on a path that will allow us to pay down our debt.
We understand America is broke.
There is an urgent need for us to contain the growth of the deficit.
Taking money from our children and borrowing from China.
Our rising debt levels poses a national security threat.
We're broke. America's broke.
Is to take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt.
When we raise and borrow all this money, 42 cents out of every dollar coming out of Washington, it's borrowed. 47% is coming from other countries like China.
Okay, so thank you, Jeff, for putting that together for me.
Mine is much longer.
So these are things you've heard your whole lives. They should be very familiar to you. And by the end of this presentation, you will begin to understand why pretty much every single word that was said is completely wrong. Okay? So mainstream economics says that big things are not possible without causing economic Armageddon. Modern monetary theory, or MMT, demonstrates that big things are possible. They're possible now. They have always been possible, and it's possible to do without causing economic problems. Therefore, much of what most of us understand to be true is completely wrong. And not just wrong, but wrong in a way that serves the wealthy few, so they remain the wealthy few. So first, I want to thank for helping me improve this presentation Virginia Kotz, James Field Martinez, Aaron Taylor, Ben Siley, and Esha Krishnaswamy, among others. And I especially want to thank MMT economist Stephen Hale, who helped me ensure that what you're about to see is entirely accurate. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening with an open mind. I do know what I'm talking about, but I encourage you, when we're done, to be skeptical and do your homework and decide the truth for yourself. Most of your questions will be answered by the presentation itself. I am asking you to postpone your questions until the end. Jeff and I will stick around until there are no more questions. No problem. MMT is easy. It's simple and it's elegant. The only thing that is hard is letting go of our lifetimes of miseducation. MMT is a school of economic thought based on the ideas of Warren Mosler. He took ideas that some of which have been around for more than 100 years, brought them back, mixed them up, and now it is a school of economic thought based on 25 years of research and scholarship developed by these economists and experts, among others. You will find most of these people are on Twitter and more than willing to answer your questions, and all of them will confirm everything I tell you today. I'm not an expert. I don't pretend to be an expert. I discovered MMT in February of last year when Jeff introduced it to me. What I am good at, what I can do, is I can introduce the basics of modern monetary theory as I learned from the economists. I can express what they taught me. When your eyes are open to MMT, however, it is time for you to move on to the experts to learn more. So first, what is money? What gives it value? And where does it come from? Money is a tool that the government uses to provision itself. They need things to be done. They have the people do them. And since we define the government, we are the government. We need these things to be done. We need to be defended. We need rule of law. We need infrastructure, scaling up cool inventions for bigger purposes. We need to gather intelligence. We need to take care of the people. Lots of other things. So the government needs things to be done with the resources that we have, and it has the people do them. We sell our productivity and our resources to the government, and they give us their money as incentive in exchange. Money has value because it is backed by the full faith and credit of the government, and that's true. But more specifically, money has value because if we do not pay our federal taxes in the money that the government gave us, then we have faith that there will be severe penalties. That's what gives money value, federal taxes. This means you must get a job in order to get their money, in order to pay your federal taxes with their money, in order to avoid those penalties. In other words, federal taxes drive money. They force the people to need the money, and they establish and legitimize its use. And notice the order of operations. You cannot pay your taxes until you get money from the government. Like a paycheck from our job, you do what the government asks you to do. They give you money in exchange, and that money is yours to keep. You can do whatever you like with it. No strings attached. You owe it to no one. It is debt-free. Debt-free. That's important. So where does it come from? In 1971, the United States, along with many other countries, went off of the gold standard and became a fiat currency. Fiat just means that the money is not backed by anything physical. I'm going to answer this specifically for the United States, but there is a similar answer for many economies. Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 8, defines the powers of Congress. Two of those powers are to coin money and to provide punishment for counterfeiting. To coin money. To coin means to create. That doesn't mean metallic. To create. So, as in to coin a phrase. So this means that Congress can create all kinds of money, paper bills, metallic coins, whatever else. Who creates the United States dollar? The answer is the central bank. In the United States, the central bank is called the Federal Reserve, but the Federal Reserve doesn't just create money because they want to create money. They create money when they are commanded to do so by the Treasury. The Treasury is commanded to do so by a law that the president signed and after the federal budget is passed. The law that the president signed was originally a bill written by Congress. And in our corrupt system, Congress is under the influence of big money lobbyists and donors. But the answer to who creates the dollar is the central bank. The answer to who authorizes the creation of the dollar is Congress. So Congress has the power to create money and to punish anyone else who tries to create money. This means that they are the only ones in the world who are allowed to authorize or appropriate the creation of the United States dollar. If resources are available, Congress can create as much money as they want to purchase those resources to do what needs to be done. This is an actual bill currently under consideration. This screenshot is from last year. This is the section of the bill for Elizabeth Warren and others who for the opioid, regarding the opioid epidemic. This is the section called the authorization of appropriations. $2.7 billion for fiscal year 2019, same amount for subsequent years. This is the amount of money that is authorized to be created when this bill is passed into law and after the federal budget is passed. That amount is created because someone sat at a computer and typed that number into this document. This is the amount of money that the authors of the bill believe is necessary to purchase the resources that are necessary to implement this bill. And money is always created for a purpose, not just because they want pocket change. Everyone except Congress, everyone except the currency issuer, and I'll say more broadly the federal government, is a user of the currency. Me, you, families, our households, cities and towns, states, and even other countries. When it comes to the dollar, we are users of the currency. We are currency users, all in the same position aside from the amount that we have. And finally, all money comes from the currency issuer. Even if you work at a store, at a business that does no business with the government, say you work at a grocery store or at a restaurant, another company does have a contract with the government. They do whatever they're supposed to do. They get money from the government. Then they use that money to pay their employees. Their employees go shopping. One of their employees gives a big tip to a waitress at a restaurant. That waitress goes shopping at your grocery store, and then you get paid with that money. All money in the economy comes from the currency issuer. So that's where money comes from. And now let's talk about how money is created and how it works its way through the economy. This is done by a process called reserve accounting. So you have a calculator. You have 900 on your calculator. You want to add 100 to it so you can make 1,000. Where does that 100 come from? Do you need to find it? Do you need to borrow it from another calculator? Do you need to pay for it? When you press 100, it is. It is as if you are the god of numbers on that calculator. And that is pretty much how the currency issuer creates its own money. Money exists when they will it to be. They are the god of their own money. And for the issuer only, the word spend is exactly equal to the word create. They spend money into the economy. They spend money into existence. They emit money into the economy. And think about it. If you are totally broke, pretend you are totally broke. You have no money in your bank account, in your pockets, nothing. But you are granted the power to create money whenever you need it. You can't keep it. You can only give it. You can only spend it. So my question is, if you had this power, do you really care that you have no money? So reserve accounting occurs at the country's central bank. How is the central bank relevant to us? I have a bank account at my local branch of Wells Fargo in my town on Fork Landing Road, along with a lot of other people and businesses. There are local branches of Wells Fargo all around the country. And all of these branches, with all of their customers and all of their bank accounts, are managed by Wells Fargo Corporate. Wells Fargo Corporate, Wells Fargo itself, has a bank account at the central bank. They have about $600 billion in their bank account. And that is a significant percentage of all of the bank accounts at all their branches. Every bank in the country has a bank account at the central bank. And more accurately, it's a spreadsheet. 2 columns. The name of the bank, how much it has. So I have $1,000 in my bank account at my local bank. My bank has $600 billion in their reserve account, or their reserves, in the central bank. The central bank is the bank of the banks. It's also the top bank. There is no Earth Bank. There is no Universe Bank. The central bank in each country is the topmost bank that creates that country's currency. So we're going to show 3 examples of reserve accounting. One where money is created, one where money is destroyed, and one where money is transferred. Example number 1, grandmom is owed $300 in Social Security benefits. How does the government give grandmom those benefits? Social Security Administration determines that grandmom is due $300. They communicate that to the central bank. The central bank communicates that to grandmom's bank, and this is what happens. Grandmom's bank's reserves are increased by $300. Grandmom's bank account is increased by $300. And that's it. This is called marking up an account. Money is created because a number was made bigger with your finger on a keyboard, on a computer, and in today's technology, on the internet.
Okay. So, let me ask you this question. That seems too simple and too, it's so simple it's outlandish. So how do you explain that to somebody who just thinks, well, that just sounds like you're making, how do you know this? You're making this up.
Well, the specific answer is that there is research, which we're going to show in the next chapter, from Stephanie Kelton, who actually did the analysis of Federal Reserve, how they do their accounting. And she's not the only one that did it. There's a number of people who went into the Federal Reserve and interviewed Federal Reserve chairmen and did the analysis of how it is actually done. And I think the answer is that how could it not be that simple? I mean, money. Where does money come from? It doesn't just pop into existence. It has to come from somewhere, and the money created by the government is only electronic. Only when bills are passed and the budget is passed, the federal budget is passed, it's only electronic. Physical money doesn't come into play until American citizens request cash from ATMs or banks. So it's only electronic at this point.
Because there used to be, with the gold standard, there was only enough currency printed that was backed up by the value of the gold, correct?
I wouldn't say printed. It was even electronic back then. I mean, and before electricity, before computers, it was just on a ledger, but it was just numbers on a spreadsheet. Now it's electronic spreadsheets. Money is not printed and has never been printed that I'm aware of until people go to ATMs or the banks. But the gold standard is the only thing that's different about the gold standard is we created all of our money at that time as well, which you're about to see.
Okay.
The only difference is that they didn't create any more than the gold that we had. So it's just an artificial limitation on that.
Okay, and so when they got us up the gold standard, they just released that artificial limitation, and now they can create as much money and put it on an electronic ledger, however they want.
Correct, and the only difference is that they pretend that there is a limitation, but that limitation only miraculously happens for the people.
Right. And it's based on taxes, and we don't have how are we going to pay for Medicare for all, and how are we going to pay for
inflation and hyperinflation and all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Example number 2, destroying money. We're starting over again. Grandma now owes federal taxes to the government, $100. How does Grandma pay those taxes? This is example 1, exactly opposite. Grandma sends in her tax return and a $100 check to the IRS. The IRS tells that to the central bank. The central bank communicates to Grandma's bank, and this is what happens. Grandma's bank's reserves are reduced by $100. Grandma's bank account is reduced by $100. And that's it. This is called marking down an account. When numbers are made lower, money dies or is destroyed or disappears. When numbers are made bigger, money is created or born.
Before we play
Here's Ben Bernanke. He was the chairman of the Federal Reserve during...
Yeah, what was that?
2 things. Number 1, Warren Mosler, who is the founder of MMT, put up, I believe it's $100 million reward for any major aspects of the foundation of MMT being flawed. And that's been out there for a long time, and no one has done anything. No one has, won that bounty. And the other thing was the story about the kids, not kids, the story about being able to, create money whenever, if you were granted that power, even though you were broke, would you care that you didn't have any money? Obviously you wouldn't. It doesn't matter that you don't have any money if you can create it whenever you need it. And that's how I introduce this to kids. I tell kids, you have this power, and they're like, wow, that would be amazing. I don't care that I don't have money. And then after they soak that in, I ask them, how could you use that power to hurt people? And I'm curious does something occur to you of how you could use that to hurt people?
Me personally?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can just tell you, but I'm wondering if something hits you immediately.
Oh yeah, losing my home. I mean, that's how they hurt people. You could use that power to hurt people. When the banks concocted this thing, and I could just create money and give it to somebody and not somebody else. I could give it to this group and not to that group.
Right, give it to bad people. And the example I use for kids is like you could buy all the food in the cafeteria and just throw it away. Something like that.
Yeah, of course.
So, thanks.
All right. Let's listen to Ben Bernanke, creator of the financial crisis, one of the creators in Obama's cabinet.
The Great Recession in 2008.
Commitments of $1 trillion, doubling the size of the Fed's balance sheet.
Is that tax money that the Fed is spending?
It's not tax money. The banks have accounts with the Fed, much the same way that you have an account in a commercial bank. So to lend to a bank, we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account that they have with the Fed. So it's much more akin, although not exactly the same, but it's much more akin to printing money than it is to borrowing.
To lend to a bank, we simply use a computer to mark up the size of the account that they have at the Fed. And when he says not exactly the same, he just means not physical money. He means on the computer. So what happens when money dies or is destroyed? A child draws a bill onto a piece of construction paper, money's created. They erase that bill. What happened to that money? Where did it go? At the end of a game, the score is lowered down to 0 again. What happened to those points? Where did they go? You have 1,000 on the calculator, you minus 100 from it, now you have 900. Where did that 100 go? And the answer is, it didn't go anywhere because it never existed to begin with. To us, to currency users, money's real. To the currency issuer, money is not real. It's a concept. Final example, transferring money. So this time, my company gives me a paper paycheck for $100. We have 2 separate banks. And this is nothing more than the first 2 examples put together. I get my paper paycheck from my company. I give that to my bank. My bank says you'll get that money in about 24 hours. My bank communicates that check to the central bank. And then this is what happens. On my company's side, the company's bank account is lowered by $100. Their bank's reserves are lowered by $100. And now on my side, my bank's reserves are raised by $100, and my bank account is raised by $100. This is reserve accounting. This is how money moves from one bank's reserves to another. $5 trillion moves through the Federal Reserve System to the central banking system in the United States every day. That's about $2 quadrillion a year. All right, next chapter, created currency. So in the 1990s, economist Stephanie Kelton discovered Warren Mosler's ideas and thought that they were wrong. And she tried to prove them wrong. And in the course of doing so, she ended up proving him right. This is the result of that research. This is in her 1998 paper called Can Taxes and Bonds Finance Government Spending? This is most of the abstract. We're going to focus on just one sentence. Modern governments actually finance all of their spending through the direct creation of high-powered money. Modern governments actually finance all of their spending through the direct creation of high-powered money. Another way of saying this is, every dollar of federal spending is and has always been financed with created currency. Every federal benefit, every time it's paid. Every federal program and agency.
Excuse me real quick.
Every federal salary.
Pause this real quick.
Every paycheck that has...
Because I just want people to know, because I've talked about this before, but anyone's new to this, Stephanie Kelton is Bernie Sanders' financial advisor.
And she was in 2016 as well.
Yes. She was in 16 and she's his financial advisor now. So I just want people to know this. One of the huge advantages of if Bernie Sanders becomes president is that we will start him, because I'm assuming he would make her Secretary of Treasury.
I would damn well hope so, yeah.
I hope so. Yeah, we all hope so. Which would really radically change all of this.
Yeah, a quick aside before, and then I have Bernanke. You said how it could be can't be this simple. This is too simple. But then you saw Bernanke, and he said it's this simple.
Yeah,
we use a computer to change numbers to make them bigger. But Bernie doesn't talk MMT in public. and I think that's just his political decision. I do think he knows. This is all speculation, but he has hired the biggest voice of MMT there is. And we spoke about AOC. She's in office because she volunteered for Bernie. You know, she didn't win because of Bernie, but she got into politics because of him. She learned MMT starting the month after I started learning it myself. And now she has Stephanie Kelton as her advisor and all these people. So even though MMT he doesn't speak it publicly, he is the reason that it is so prevalent right now.
Yeah.
He allows it to happen under the wire.
My guess is it's a political strategy because this is too big of a pill to swallow. Bernie doesn't want to get his message confused, and they're already calling him a crazy socialist. Then they'll just be like, "Oh, Bernie Sanders thinks you can just write your own money." Like
right.
Just like they said, AOC's Green New Deal says you can't have babies and planes are outlawed. You know, that's what they said on Fox News. So.
Right. I totally agree. I think I disagree with his decision, but I think that's his decision, and it's certainly a reasonable one.
Yeah, it's reasonable. Okay, let's get back to this.
Ever been received by a federal employee. The military is a federal program. Every military personnel, the salary, and every piece of equipment is and has always been financed with created currency. And yet we often hear, I don't want my taxes paying for war. I want my taxes paying for healthcare and education. But the military is a federal program, so how does that make sense? We also hear, I don't want my taxes paying for your big programs. But if it is a federal program, how does that make sense? Social Security is a federal program. Every Social Security benefit since the law was passed in 1935 has been financed with created currency. So how can Social Security ever go broke, be stolen from, be borrowed from? And the same is true with all federal benefits. How can its funds ever be squandered? And why would it ever need to save today in order to be able to pay tomorrow? And finally, why do we pay FICA taxes?
So let me ask this question here. Someone who's going to go, well, my whole life I've heard that there's no social, because there's not enough money for Social Security because they borrowed against it. And now you're telling me with a keystroke on a computer they can just create money? And it's almost like this is designed to deliberately keep everybody in the dark and keep us all scurrying around to go to work to pay bills and taxes when they could give us everything we want.
There is a quote on the Social Security Administration website where FDR says these FICA taxes, these taxes have nothing to do with economics. It is pure politics. And the reason that he did that is because he wants people to say, I've been paying into this my whole life. You can't take this away from me. Even though these taxes do not pay for any of these things, FICA taxes do not and have not ever paid for Social Security. They go into a trust fund, which is just a scorecard of how much you've paid. And it's just basically a gold standard on top of Social Security. So yeah, they could easily create money to pay off Social Security benefits because we certainly have the resources for seniors to purchase. We're not going to have inflation. But this trust fund is the artificial limitation on top of Social Security, just like the gold standard is the artificial limitation on, the entire economy. Okay. So when they say that Social Security is going broke, what they mean is this meaningless scorecard called the trust fund is going down to zero. But that doesn't mean that they still can't pay it out. They just made this stupid rule that basically you're allowed to leave the room, but only if you bang your head. And if you don't bang your head, I'm going to shoot you dead, or you're going to go to jail. It's just a stupid rule that they created, an artificial limitation.
To keep us distracted on how the ruling class has been sticking it to us for centuries.
Actually, before you start, there is a trust fund and taxes in Medicare for all 4 proposed Medicare for alls, all of them, even though the taxes will never be used for anything, they are in there. So Medicare for all is wonderful, but it has this neoliberal pay for in it that doesn't need to be there. And because people don't get this, they're not fighting it. What needs to happen is that pay for needs to be excised and just put in, however much money, just put the number there.
Right.
It's not a clean bill. It's a wonderful bill, but it's not a clean one.
All right. Oh, boy.
Next chapter. Federal taxes do not fund federal spending. Federal spending funds federal taxes. And this is not just a cute statement. It's precisely true. And remember the order of operations. You cannot pay your taxes until you get money from the government. Same abstract, different sentence. It is argued that the proceeds from taxation and bond sales are technically incapable of financing government spending. And when she says technically incapable, she means impossible. Economist Pavlina Cherneva, taxes are not stockpiled in any material sense for future respending. Economist Randall Wray, indeed, if government spends and lends currency into existence, it clearly does not need tax revenue before it can spend. Same paper, different, not in the abstract. Taxes, Stephanie Kelton. Taxes are not even capable of financing government spending since their collection implies their destruction. And destruction in the same way that the 100 is destroyed in our subtraction problem. All federal spending is financed with created currency, which logically extends that federal taxes do not pay for anything. And here's some evidence to emphasize this. During the Great Depression, the people had no money. And yet this is exactly when we paid for 2 of the most ambitious programs in the history of our country, World War II and FDR's New Deal. Here's the entire abstract. Federal taxes do not pay for anything because all federal spending is financed with created currency, which is proven by the realities of reserve accounting. And that's the entire purpose of Stephanie Kelton's paper. Notice the sentence right before the 2 that we just analyzed. After carefully considering the complexities of reserve accounting, these are the conclusions that we draw. Next chapter. Since federal taxes don't pay for anything, then why do we pay federal taxes?
To control us.
Federal taxes drive money. Taxes make people need the money. So they do what the government needs, what we need. Federal taxes control inflation, one of many tools to do so. We can raise taxes on a product or on the people themselves to reduce demand on a product. We could do the opposite.
I just want to add this to the viewers. Do you see how there's yet another way that they're keeping us controlled? Because if we had everything we wanted, then they couldn't go out and do evil, awful stuff. They couldn't just write all this currency and then make sure that they keep most of it and do all of their wars and all of this awful stuff. That's, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but that's one of the reasons it seems like they're forcing us to pay taxes, which means they force us to go to work to make the money, to pay the taxes. So we are beholden to them in this sort of slave labor economy of sorts. And now that, there's 40 million people living in poverty in America and 60% of the population can't afford a $500 emergency, it's another way, and we all don't have health care. It's another way to keep us all sort of as indentured servants to the ruling class.
you are correct given who has taken our government. It's not the problem of the government. It's not the problem of the economy. It's not the problem of economics. It's the problem who has taken our government from us and used it for their purposes. Basically, as I say later, the problem is not the government. The problem is those who have stolen the government from us and shut us out. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and and Ilhan Omar and so on, Ayanna Pressley and so on, they're who we need in the government, and they will use it for good, where currently it's being used for evil. It's just like knowledge. Government is just neutral. Economics is just neutral. It can be used for good, bad, or not at all. And it's being used for bad because we're not in there to be able. They're not letting us in.
All right. That's a good way to put it.
We can lower taxes on the product or on the people themselves to increase demand on that product. Federal taxes can also impose moral decisions. If we don't want the people to do something, the government can raise taxes on that in order to make it more expensive to do so. We could do the opposite. If we want the people to do something, the government can lower taxes on those activities to make it less expensive to do so. We can also tax the rich to discourage wealth inequality. We need to tax the rich because they're too damn rich. They profit off of our suffering, they purchase our politicians and laws, and they're making it such that we can't live on the planet anymore. Taxing the rich reduces their power, which instantly increases our power. We need to tax the rich because it is the moral and right thing to do, not because we need their money. Because with our current economy, it is not possible to get their money at the federal level. This is a graph representing the individual wealth of our members of Congress, personal wealth. 535 members total. 37 of those members in the yellow have a personal wealth in the bottom 80%. 80% of the country is 260 million people, and they are represented by 7% of Congress.
Okay, I'm going to read that one again. I just want to say that again. 260 million people in this country are represented by 7% of Congress. So only 7% of Congress are actually working class people. Just to give you an idea what Jeff was just talking about, who is controlling the government and who is controlling the Federal Reserve and everything, just so you know, that's what's happening.
Yep. Oh, and I forgot to say something before, which is, this idea of, slave labor and all that stuff because the wrong people are in charge of government. But it's actually even deeper than that, which I'm only starting to learn, so I can't really speak about it too much. But there's a book by David Graeber called Debt, 5,000 Years. And it talks about how religion is used to make people feel like they have to be in debt, that even being born, the act of being born puts you in debt. Jesus died for our sins, and now we owe him even before we were born. So it's just the concept of sort of priming the pump, of getting people to think that debt is even deeper than, a human created thing. It's like a God created thing. So
excellent point.
Next chapter. The Pony for All Act of 2018. So Hillary Clinton, in her book regarding the 2016 campaign, said to Bernie Sanders, "It's so nice that you want to give everybody a pony, Bernie. Everybody would love a pony, but how are you going to pay for it?" So I want to do a thought experiment. Let's write the Pony for All Act. Let's give every citizen a free pony if they want one. And it can be done. And maybe not literally for every single citizen, but it certainly can be done to a very large scale. So what would it take to do so? The first step is to understand our current situation. We can't know where we're going if we don't know where we are. So I'll use the United States as an example. We have 320 million Americans. We have about 500,000 ponies. This is clearly not going to work. This demand far outstrips supply. We must make these roughly equal. The Pony for All Act by design is for all. So we don't want to decrease demand in this case. We must increase supply. So how do we do that? That's a big ask. 500,000 has to go up to 320 million. So we have lots of options, but given our current state of technology, given the scale that we need to do this, the only option is reproduce. Mommy and daddy ponies are going to have to do their things over and over and over again. Another question we have to answer: how long will it take? In order to answer that, we must understand the biological realities of ponies. How many are there currently? What is their gestation period? How long after giving birth can a mommy do her thing again? What's the minimum age for giving birth? What's the mortality rate? So given our current situation and given these biological realities, we determine it will take roughly 20 years. So let's get started. So we've been taking care of 500,000 ponies, no problem.
This is what I got.
But now the population is exploding, and this has enormous consequences. It means that we will need a lot more supplies. It means that we will need to educate millions of more people to help us develop and maintain this. And it means that we will need to distribute all of these things around the country to avoid overcrowding and to bring it closer to the people that need them. So the Pony for All Act will create a new industry with lots of good new jobs, which is a good side benefit. We have something much more important that we're trying to get at. So now it's 20 years later, we now have 320 million ponies, and it's time for the people to pick them up. They go to Ponies R Us. We have the best staff. It's perfectly organized. That's not what we're talking about here. But the people don't know how to take care of ponies, so we need to train them. Their houses aren't prepared to take care of ponies, so we need to prepare them. So all of the supplies and labor that and services that we just spoke about are now needed by everyone. And finally, with 320 million, it is a serious question of what happens when they die. So it takes 20 years, and this is the full life cycle. This is what goes into our bill. And we have not said a word about money. But now that we have determined the resources that are necessary to make it happen, now we can estimate as a final step, estimate the cost of those resources and put it into a section in the bill, authorization of appropriations. So let's say some powerful person says 20 years is unacceptable. I will make my little girl wait 5 years, but I am not making her wait 20 years. You will make this happen. I don't care what it takes. So what are our options? We could make it the law. We could threaten severe consequences, and we could throw money at it. $10 trillion, whatever it takes. So the question is if we force it to happen faster, what happens? And the answer is nothing. Forcing it to happen faster simply won't work, because no amount of money can change biological processes. No amount of money can change how quickly people can be educated, how fast we can distribute these things around the country, how long it takes to train citizens, and how long it takes to prepare their homes. This is what's important. To the currency issuer, the only thing that matters is real resources, not money. Because to currency users, money is real. To the currency issuer, money is not real. If the resources are available, then creating the money to purchase them is not inflationary. If you have the resources to do it, do it. And if you don't, don't. When I say real resources, real tangible stuff. Raw materials, labor, technology, and time, because you can have the stuff, but it takes time to make it happen. Nothing can make the Pony for All Act happen in less than 20 years. The realities of real resources are outside of human control. Money and rules are human-created concepts. How many rules you have, how good those rules are, don't matter. Because when it comes down to it, there is no way to ensure that humans follow human-created rules. But no matter how corrupt an individual is, or how corrupt an organization is, there is no way to violate the realities, the limitations of real resources. So as silly as it is, as resource intensive as it is, we can actually give every citizen a free pony. So why in the world can we not give them universal health care and college? And especially since it requires no resources directly speaking, why can't we cancel student debt? Alan Greenspan was the predecessor to Ben Bernanke on the Federal Reserve. Here he is speaking with former Speaker Paul Ryan on the subject of Social Security. This is congressional testimony, so it is under oath. And he is, in his own way, going to confirm everything that we just discussed, pretending that it's a discussion. Oops.
So having personal retirement accounts is another way of making a future retiree benefits more secure for their retirement. And also, do you believe that personal retirement accounts as a component to a system of solvency does help improve solvency? Because when you have a personal retirement account policy, it's accompanied with a benefit offset. With that feature in place, do you believe that personal retirement accounts can help us achieve solvency for the system and make those future retiree benefits more secure?
Well, I wouldn't say that the pay-as-you-go benefits are insecure in the sense that there's nothing to prevent the federal government from creating as much money as it wants and paying it to somebody. The question is, how do you set up a system which assures that the real assets are created which those benefits are employed to purchase? So it's not a question of security. It's a question of the structure of a financial system which assures that the real resources are created for retirement as distinct from the cash. The cash itself is nice to have, but it's got to be in the context of the real resources being created at the time those benefits are paid, so that you can purchase real resources with the benefits, which of course are cash.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer the same question?
Paul Ryan regrets asking that because my donors really want me to privatize this. Please tell me that there is an economic justification to please my donors. And Paul Ryan and Alan Greenspan says there's not. It's not a question of economic security. It's a question that the real resources are created for retirement so that you can purchase the real resources with the benefits, which is money.
So meaning the specific, and I'm sure you're going to get into it, but like just to clarify what that means, what Alan Greenspan said, we can create as much money as we want, but we got to make sure that the resources are there. Using your pony example, we can make as many ponies as we want, but we got to make sure there's an infrastructure for hay and stables and transportation, all that other stuff. So specific to, let's say, something like Medicare for all, right? So the federal government can just say, here's all the money, everybody gets Medicare for all. Anyone who wants it gets it. So correct, and maybe I'm wrong here, but clarify. So Alan Greenspan is then saying we just need to make sure that they're specifically to the Medicare for all issue.
Yeah, I would change around how you think about it. They don't just create money and here's Medicare for all. Just like we saw with the pony thing, which I have to say, that is the chapter most influenced by you and our experience, especially the ancillary industries. I have a memory of that. You should stop. I would recommend thinking of it the other way around. They don't create money so that they can do stuff. They think of what they want to do, and then they determine how much it costs. Because money is a unit of measurement for resources.
Right.
That's all it is, from the federal government's point of view.
Right.
For us, it's different. For the federal government's point of view, money is a unit of measurement for resources. Right. So they don't just create money and then they think of stuff they want to do. They think of stuff they want to do, and then they estimate how much those resources cost and create exactly that amount.
I see.
Okay. But Medicare for all, I mean, think about it with Medicare for all. It's only nationalizing the payment system. It's not creating new hospitals and doctors and so on.
Oh, that's there.
It's
already
just
in place.
It's just nationalizing the insurance system, getting rid of the private insurance industry, and recreating the nationalized insurance industry, which may result in some more demands, which may result in the need for more doctors and so on. But that's completely different than nationalizing the entire. Right.
Yeah, and part of what Medicare does in its current thing is you get a surgery and the hospital says it's $1,500, and Medicare comes in and says no, it's going to be $1,200, and that's
right. And they're going to bring them an amazing amount of business, so they're not going to complain. Right. And they don't want to have a choice anyway. And we need to pay our doctors well.
Yeah, the medical industry actually will benefit and profit from it. They make it seem like, and because they don't want to, the days of them charging, $500 for an aspirin will be over, but they'll still be doing fine.
Right. They'll have a gold-plated pool instead of a platinum-plated pool.
Yeah, my heart will break so hard for them, Really
right.
It'll just like if Betsy DeVos has to go down to one yacht instead of 10, I don't know how I'll sleep at night, quite honestly. All right, let's go back to this.
So Alan Greenspan, in his own verbose way, came to exactly the same conclusion. To the currency issuer, the only thing that matters, the only thing that is real resources, not money. Generally speaking, seniors don't need money. They need the things that they can purchase with that money. Next chapter, the federal deficit. The federal deficit is the amount of money spent into the economy minus the taxes that they collect back. Example, the government spends $3 trillion, they tax back $1.7 trillion, so the federal deficit is $1.3 trillion. That's the money left in the economy, left in the people's pockets. Too much spending, a ballooning deficit, is not the problem. The only thing that matters is what our government does and doesn't do, and who they do it for and who they don't do it for. The problem is that their spending is immoral and unjust and inequitable and inefficient, and it's funneled to the wealthy few because the wealthy few legally bribe them to do it. Too much spending is not the problem. The problem is income inequality and poisoned water and poverty and suicide and so on. That's reality. What the government does is more important than what's left over. The federal deficit is like our federal paycheck. It is and really should be called our national income. So when you hear someone important say, it is urgent that we reduce the deficit, what they are saying, whether they know it or not, is that it is urgent that we reduce the people's income, that we stop giving the people income. Next chapter, the national debt. So currency users require income before we can spend. We must get money from somewhere before we can spend. If we don't get it from the government, we must get it from somewhere else. So an example is we can get it from a bank. So we currency users go to a bank and we ask for a loan, say $1,000. The bank analyzes our histories and our net worth, and they decide if we are likely to pay it back. Then they give us that money. When we get that money, we are instantly in debt to that bank for $1,000 plus interest. And we are in debt to a private for-profit corporation. And this kind of debt is scary because the bank will do whatever it takes to get their money back. This is called private debt. Currency users getting a bank loan, there is no equivalent situation for the currency issuer. There's just nothing that makes sense compatible. There is no bank above the currency issuer. In the United States, the Federal Reserve must do as Congress commands them to do. And I mean, it's just a ridiculous idea that the one and only God of money, has to go to one of its subjects to ask for the money that only it can create. Alan Greenspan again.
Are U.S. Treasury bonds still safe to invest in?
Very much so. I think this is not an issue of credit rating. The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that. So there is zero probability of default.
The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always create money on a computer to do it. There is zero probability of default. Not low probability. He didn't say remote probability. He said zero probability. As long as the government exists, it is impossible for them to not be able to pay its bills. Currency issuers such as the United States do not have a debt. They just don't. Not in any way that means like a debt does to me and you. But practically speaking, the national debt is the accumulation of every federal paycheck from the beginning of the country. So in the United States, the first dollar was created in 1796. The federal paycheck, what we used to call the federal deficit. All of the federal paychecks that have ever been spent. That's practically speaking what the national debt is. The national debt is the debt-free savings of the citizens. Literally the money in our bank accounts, investments, and wallets. And savings by definition means debt-free. Like a paycheck from our job, we do what's asked, we get that money after taxes, and we get to do whatever we want with it. No strings attached, we don't owe it to anyone, it's debt-free. The national debt is and should be called our national savings.
So let me see if I got this right. So the national debt that they say is this insane number, it keeps growing every day. All it is they're just adding up every time the federal government spends money. They're saying what they're saying, so it just seems like it's just used as a marketing tactic or something, I don't know what, or some sort of scare tactic, and correct me if I'm wrong. Let me see I want to see if I have this right, Jeff. So
sure.
The national debt is just accumulation. Every time the federal government, so like you take at the end of every year, the federal government says we spent this amount of money, however many hundreds of millions or billions or trillions of dollars, and the national
minus the taxes.
Right. We spent $1 trillion. Like you said, we spent $3 trillion. We brought back 1.7. So all we really spent was $1.3 trillion because we got 1.7 trillion in taxes.
Right.
So you take that final number since 1796 and add it up, and that's what the national debt is. So it's really not a debt. It's just this is how much the government has spent.
The debt, calling it a debt, is really stupid. It really makes no sense. It's for two reasons. Number one, it's our assets. I mean, yes, the rich have too much of it, but it's our assets. And what was the other thing I was going to say?
So it's not stupid. This is by design to make us think.
Oh, it's stupid
we're in debt. Well, we're all going belly up, and there's no Social Security, and this, that, and the other thing to keep us all scared and afraid or whatever.
Right, and the national debt. If you have $50,000 in debt, is that a bad thing?
Me personally, yeah.
You personally, but what if you had $100,000 in assets? Now is $50,000 in debt a bad thing?
Right. No.
Right. National debt is only one side of the picture, first of all, and it's a completely twisted side of that. It's a completely twisted view of it. But it's also just one side. What about our national assets?
Right. We have way more than that in national assets.
Yeah, I mean, it's about 120 trillion or something like in national assets, but that's all bank debt, and I don't want to get too far off on a tangent with that. But the national debt is our value. It's our value. Period.
Right. It's like a home loan. It's like a mortgage. Like, oh my God, I have a $300,000 mortgage, but my house is worth $600,000, so I'm good.
That is part of it, and also it's. I lost track. It'll come back to me.
But
lost track. Continue. I'll come back to me.
That's all right. I'll go back to the video. That cleared it up for me. Maybe our viewers are going bananas, but I don't know. We'll If this is your first MMT
I remember.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember. The debt, and what I'm about to say, the debt is what the government owes people as far as U.S. Treasuries. It's how much in U.S. Treasury. That's the technical. It's basically a reflection of our savings, but it's what really is the U.S. owes people in Treasuries. And yes, we owe people those when they come to maturity. We owe them. They must honor those Treasuries. Okay, that is how they pay back the debt that they have. But those Treasuries are never used for anything. They don't have to sell them to begin with. It's free money. We just heard Alan Greenspan say there's zero probability of default. So when you do an investment, you take a risk, right? You do an investment for a risk of a bigger reward. But when you buy a U.S. Treasury, there's zero probability of default. So there is no risk. It is literally free money. So they don't need to sell them to begin with, and they don't ever use them for income anyway, because taxes and bonds don't pay for anything.
So the ruling class must know this. Obviously, they know this. And this is my guess here. Maybe this isn't your side of the pool, but like, my guess is the reason, because I'm trying to figure out, obviously they know this. They're not dumb. They're not like, whoops, we didn't know. They know this. This is by design, that they're just going to call it national debt, and they're not going to talk about the national assets. And what they should call it, as you said, is it should be called national savings. So obviously the ruling class knows this, and they must be, the reason they're so afraid of like Bernie Sanders becoming president, because if he becomes president, he just goes, guess what, everybody? Here's MMT. We now have a national savings, Green New Deal paid for, college debt forgiveness, Medicare for all, done. Paid for, done. Oh, and I'm going to tax the rich because it's morally the right thing to do. Oh, and I'm going to cut the military budget in half because it's morally the right thing to do. But we don't need that money to pay for these other things. So the ruling class that is benefiting off of the war and the oil and the banking, they don't want the word to get out because they won't have 10 yachts anymore.
That's pretty much it. And I think Stephanie Kelton would hopefully be Treasury Secretary, or someone like her would be Treasury Secretary, and she would start considering these bonds. Do we really need to sell them? Because obviously we don't. We don't need to sell them. And if we don't sell them, then that effectively means that there is no national debt, because that's technically what the national debt is. So they won't have that story anymore. And so yeah.
Oh, all right. I love learning this. Every time I've learned so much from talking to you, and every time we talk, I learn more. So
it's crazy stuff. And this is 1 hour of basically 25 years of knowledge.
Right. No, it's crazy. But the more you unpack everything, the more you see. I mean, I've done.
You don't realize. I mean, you do now, but like economics is life and death for billions. Mm-hmm. You just don't. You think it's a boring subject, and it's life and death for us all. This is what stands between us and tyranny, and I mean that by they would have a dictator would have guns and swords and force basically slavery. Mm-hmm. Taxes are the potential for violence once a year, April 15th, but that still keeps us in line all year long.
Yeah, and it's a thing in the interview I did with Fidel Kaboub on this channel. That is, for those of you watching, I do a great interview with Fidel Kaboub, who's one of the experts that was listed at the top of this video, about how MMT and the Green New Deal, because I was like, how are we going to pay for all of these programs with the Green New Deal? MMT fixes that immediately.
Yeah, and Fidel is what gave me the where I got they paid for the war during the Depression idea. And just one small correction, which is, boom, MMT. We've had MMT. We've had it since before we were born. You're not wrong. I just want to emphasize that we've had MMT since before we were born. It's just that only the super wealthy know it. Right. And they're the only ones that have been using it to their advantage and pretending that we can't use it to ours. That's
what I mean. It's always been there. We get people in power that actually have souls and can see the reflections in the mirror, unlike these vampire motherfuckers that are shit now. And what then happens is they can say, we are now going to use MMT for good, and everyone's going to get all this nice stuff, and we can actually save the human race from the climate collapse that we are on the doorstep of.
Right. Yeah, and I knew that that's what you meant, but I just wanted to clarify. And damn, lost track. Go ahead.
That's all right. Let's go back to the video.
So the national savings is what we, the people, own, not owe. The problem is not too much wealth. The problem is never too much wealth. The problem is wealth inequality. Who has too much of it and who doesn't have enough of it? So that's practically speaking. The national debt is our national savings. Technically speaking, it is an accounting reflection, roughly an accounting reflection of the national savings. We can talk about that after. The real national debt, however, that really will bankrupt our grandchildren has nothing to do with money. Next chapter, inflation. So those who don't understand MMT or don't want you to understand MMT will say things like the following. Creating money causes inflation. And when you create more than that, it will cause hyperinflation. So if you create $1, it will cause inflation. And if you dare create a second dollar, it will cause hyperinflation. The idea that creating money causes inflation is just as ridiculous as saying birth causes crime. All criminals are born. The only thing that causes inflation, can be inflationary, is spending money on resources that do not exist or there are not enough to go around. Spending money on resources that are fully employed. Inflation is not when the price of bread goes up. It is not when the price of all products in an industry go up. Inflation is when the price levels of goods and services for sale in an economy go up and continue to go up. And roughly speaking, that means everything an average family purchases. So this is inflation. Is this a bad thing? You have $20,000 in debt. Is that a bad thing? Not if you have $50,000 in assets, because in that case you have $30,000 net worth. You need the full picture before you can draw conclusions. This is inflation. Your wages are going right up with prices. So do you care about inflation in this case? This is also inflation. Your wages are going up even faster than prices. Than prices. Do you care about inflation in this case? This is inflation as well. This is clearly a bad thing, but why is it a bad thing? Prices are going up normal, but our wages have stagnated. They are being suppressed. Our wages are artificially low. This is inflation. This is also a bad thing. Our wages are going up normal, but our prices are going up way faster than that. Our prices are artificially high. An example of this is the pharmaceutical industry price gouging American citizens and the government doing nothing to stop it. Inflation can also be a good thing. The government can increase taxes on things that are harmful to society, choosing to create inflationary pressure for the greater good. This is inflation since 1960. The only two inflationary episodes that we have experienced in this country were OPEC oil shocks in the 1970s. OPEC deliberately withheld its product in retaliation for our support of Israel, and that was coupled with our misguided decision to make our society dependent on that one product. So that caused problems. Other than that, there has not been any substantial inflation since 1960, even though during this entire time, every dollar of federal spending has been created currency, financed with created currency. In 2018 alone, $100 trillion in US Treasuries were paid back. No inflation. Inflation, the boogeyman, has nothing to do with inflation in reality. We understand the nature of inflation. We have many tools to manage it. And many of those tools can be automated to bypass fickle and corrupt politicians. And finally, hyperinflation occurring in an economy such as the United States is not just unlikely, it's absurd. Economies such as the United States do not need to raise taxes for the purposes of revenue. And they also have an abundance of resources. And because of these two things, they can provide for all of their people without causing substantial inflation. And when I say provide, I do not mean luxury, I mean stop their suffering. But even with the best designed programs, policies, you cannot predict the future. Resources are destroyed and created and invented every day, new inventions every day. At some point, it may be necessary to increase taxes in order to offset inflation. But the overall burden on citizens will be much lower. And if MMT economists get their way, it will be much lower still after the federal job guarantee is passed into law. So So that is pretty much MMT, and I want to say, after learning it for a year and looking again at our government and society, the conclusions that I personally draw. So much of the rest of this is what I believe, not what MMT says. So
Graham, can I interject before we get into this
video.
last chapter?
Sure.
Okay, I just want to bring up hyperinflation, because that's a huge thing of skepticism that people talk about. So Zimbabwe and Venezuela and 1920s Weimar and all that stuff. And so, yeah, they say, well, we're going to have hyperinflation because of Zimbabwe and because of all these things. It is the most important thing to understand is that the United States of America, the economy, we can provide for all of our people with our domestic supply of real resources. That means we do not have to import as necessity. We import a lot of stuff, but not as necessity. We don't import food. Venezuela imports more than 70% of their food. So they're dependent on an external currency. Every hyperinflation in history is due to a catastrophic supply shock. That catastrophic supply shock, food in Venezuela, Weimar Germany because they lost the war and devastated, the war devastated their country. Zimbabwe because they gave all the farms to people who socially deserved it but didn't know how to farm, and their agriculture industry output dropped by 90% on top of other corruption. That catastrophic supply shock forced the creation of currency just to stave off the inevitable, which was already happening. And that forcing thing does not exist in countries like the United States, which is why hyperinflation is not possible in the United States unless they do something dramatic like set off a nuclear bomb in New York City.
We can do everything. The only thing we mainly import here is oil, which we need to get off of anyway. So,
Right.
Yeah.
And that would have stopped the OPEC oil shocks.
Right.
That would have stopped the 1970s. Right. So, okay, thanks.
Sure.
From the beginning, one more time. And I hope there will be a little bit of a different perspective.
When are we going to get serious, Candy, about the debt?
We got to deal with this big long-term debt problem, or it will deal with us.
But it's very simple. The government works like your house works. Our government has promised far more money than it actually has or probably ever will have.
We have to reduce our deficit, and we have to get back on a path that will allow us to pay down our debt.
We understand America is broke.
There is an urgent need for us to contain the growth of the deficit.
Taking money from our children and borrowing from China.
Our rising debt levels poses a national security threat.
We're broke. America's broke. Is to take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt.
When we raise and borrow all this money, 42 cents out of every dollar coming out of Washington, it's borrowed. 47% is coming from other countries like China.
Oh. It's great listening to criminals.
Okay, so
stop it.
Are they lying?
Stop it, please.
Yeah.
So when he says borrowing from China, what he means is that Chinese corporations have sold us made in China, and we pay them with U.S. Treasuries. That's called borrowing. We don't use that money for anything, and when those bonds are mature, they usually just roll them over because it's free money. But that's what's called paying back our debt. So borrowing from China, the Chinese government doesn't owe our debt. Chinese companies and people do. And because they sold us products, we pay them in U.S. Treasuries, and that's what Paul Ryan has called borrowing, as if it's the same kind of borrowing for me and you.
Right.
They not know better. It doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned, because I give benefit of the doubt to the powerless. I will not give benefit of the doubt to the powerful, who benefit when the powerless are ignorant about how the economy works. Our federal representatives tell us that they can't give us what we need to survive, even though they really want to, because they tell us that not even preventing our suffering in reality is more important than their made-up fiscal responsibility. And not only do they pretend that they can't give us these things, they also pretend that they do not know how to give us these things. How are you going to pay for it? is the question that our government, who does understand how the economy works, asks the people who don't understand how the economy works. So somehow the people need to figure it out for the government before the government gives the people what they need to not die. Our governments have an abundance of resources, but they choose to withhold it. And because they are legally bribed to do it. And this leaves the people to fight over the scraps, which causes behavior like this. Please take a moment to read that.
This is like poor shaming is so great. We've created such a filthy society that we support the ruling class and think that the poor are just lazy.
I deserve more than you. I deserve more than you. Not because society is unjust and we're all doing the best we can.
Forgive me, I thought it was still silent. I was just going to say this is the section that I got from AOC's scarcity mindset that we talked about last time.
Right. The students are waiting.
Both of these tweets are actually responses to her video of that.
Which could very well be bots. But because she's, her crazy socialism is a threat to the ruling class. Anyone who gets smeared by both sides, they're doing something right.
And in a terrible situation. No, I deserve more than you because you are less than me. You are less than me. We come up with justifications for our comfort when others needlessly suffer. And we come up with justifications for our suffering when others needlessly comfort. And while this behavior is disgusting, what's really disgraceful is the system that allows it to happen. Our government allows their people to fight over the scraps when they have more than enough to provide for all. They shame and punish their people for making bad decisions when they could easily prevent us from having to face those decisions in the first place. Our governments manufacture scarcity. And because of this, we have to be terrible to each other and to our families and to ourselves and to our environment just to survive. So our government won't provide for us, who's left? But for-profit, private industry. We are forced into private debt. Our lives are placed on the altar of their profit. They legally bribe our politicians so they can legally steal from us. So the wealthy few sabotage our government with big money, and then they turn around and tell us that government is the problem. But they shut us out of the government so that we don't have a chance to make it better, but it doesn't matter because the government is the problem. And then they tell us that the only possible solution is the free market, which coincidentally enriches those who sabotage the government. The problem is not the government, the problem is those who have stolen it from us and locked us out. Currency users have to worry about money. We have to worry about our bills and debt collectors in bankruptcy. We have to worry about what will happen if we can't afford to pay our bills. For us, fiscal responsibility is critical. For us, private debt can be ruinous. Currency issuers have a lot of things that they need to worry about, but not money. Fiscal responsibility for a currency issuer is nonsensical. Public debt is nothing. So if you remember nothing else from today, please remember a currency issuer is totally different than a currency user. Congressional appropriations. Here is the technically correct answer to how are you going to pay for it. Every federal program is paid for with congressional appropriations. We are a sovereign fiat currency. If we had the resources to do it, You can choose to create the money to purchase those resources to do it. But here's the answer that I believe should be given to this terrible question. We will pay for it by getting you out of office and replacing you with someone who will never ask us that question again. They will do whatever it takes to just get the job done. And until that day, 100% of our energy will be spent making your life a living hell. There is nothing wrong with opposing federal programs, such as federal job guarantee and so on. But if you oppose them because of economics, if you oppose them because they will raise our taxes, because they will cause inflation, because it is too expensive, MMT demonstrates that that argument is invalid. So either you should reconsider your opposition or come up with a more honest argument for your opposition. Great things are possible. They're possible now. And they have always been possible. But they will only happen if we stand up and demand them. We will never stand up and demand them until we believe that it's possible. Modern monetary theory demonstrates that it is possible. MMT is nonfiction economics. Learning MMT will not stop the corrupt from doing bad things. It won't. Learning MMT will stop the corrupt from stopping us from doing good things. Thank you.
Well, Jeff, that was fantastic. I really appreciate it. And just to summarize here for my viewers, you know, if this is just your first entry into MMT, I urge you to do several things. First of all, I have an MMT playlist. Watch my interview with Stephen Hale, my interview with Fidel Kaboub, and my numerous interviews with Jeff to educate yourself and start following these people. And I mean, there's Jimmy Dore has an interview or two with Stephanie Kelton, I believe.
Yeah.
So watch these and get educated and know this one thing. The ruling class, don't trust them. Anything they tell us is bullshit. It's like George Carlin said it. When they say bipartisan, you know you're getting fucked. So when they tell you we can't have things, just know the people in power don't want us to have them, because it'll hurt their precious, stable of yachts that they can ride to and from their helicopter from their polo fields. So just know that's what's going on. And the fact that you're watching this tells me that you don't trust the corporate media. That's why you're coming here to my show. And ask the questions. That's what I want this show, Political Vigilante, to do. I want people to get involved. I want to get at the truth, and I want to ask the questions. That's what it's all about. Jeff, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Two things. Number one, you could, and this actually came up in the skepticism that I got from this presentation, really good questions that I got from people. One of them was like, well, yeah, I don't believe MMT. I don't believe MMT, meaning when they say that we can do all these things. And maybe you're right, but it doesn't matter what you or I think, because we're only speculating. But what MMT definitely says is there is no financial limitation, no economic limitation for doing Medicare for all and free college and forget canceling student debt and Green New Deal. What we should do is, what MMT shows is that we should do the inflation and resource impact analysis for each of these programs. And if those inflation and resource analysis show that we can do it, and with canceled student debt, there is a study by Kelton and others that shows that we can do it, not just do it, but it will help. And the Green New Deal analysis was just released by Kelton and others, showing that, yeah, sure, of course we can do it. And not only can we do it without damage, we can do it and it will really help. And what I think is that the how will you pay for a question, all of this nonsense, is to get us to short circuit the conversation so that we don't get to this analysis, because they're deathly afraid that if we get to this analysis, it's going to show us that we can actually do it.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say was I just would like to actually just read the text on the final slide, which I don't speak over at all.
Sure.
So you can just freeze it once it comes up in just a few seconds.
This one?
Yep. So this is the key MMT insight. I'm just going to read this right here. I don't talk about this in my presentation. I just leave this up while we talk, questions. This is the key insight of MMT. Our governments are capable of vastly more than we are told. They are and have always been capable of great things. Warren Mosler, the founder of MMT. The MMT understandings put policy options on the table that were not previously considered viable. Eric Timon and L. Randall Wray. One of the main contributions of modern monetary theory has been to explain why monetarily sovereign governments have a very flexible policy space that is unencumbered by money. Ellis Winningham, who is a teacher who doesn't publish publicly, but he is a very influential teacher among activists. He says, MMT demonstrates that our government, the monetary system, can work absolute miracles for humanity. And that is something that those who are currently in charge do not want you to understand. And finally, Stephanie Kelton, which is the final sentence in her abstract, which we talked about during this presentation. The final sentence in her abstract is, the analysis carries significant implications for fiscal as well as monetary policy. So it shows that we've been lied to an extreme. We can be provided for, where provided means stop our suffering.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for first of all, for taking the time and putting this presentation together and all the work you've done over the last year, for reaching out to me, and for you've supported my channel. You've been a Patreon supporter, which I appreciate, so that I can get this word out. It's a big part of what I'm doing. And you have helped grow. The first time we talked, I was sitting at my desk or whatever with my Batman blue light photo behind me. Now I'm in a little bit of a better setup. And it's because, progressive activists such as yourself have, reached out and supported me on a lot of levels. So I really appreciate your time. And everybody out there watching, the Progressive Comedy Tour is coming to the East Coast. You can meet Jeff, if you're in the Philadelphia area, June 14th and 15th, Ron Placone and I will be there. Jeff will be there. He's also a musician. He has Ron's theme song, which I'm excited to see live. But we will be the 12th of June. We will be in D.C., and Lee Camp might pop in. The 13th, we're going to be in Baltimore. As I said, 14th, 15th, Philly. The 16th, New Haven, Connecticut. The 17th, New York City, which Jordan Cheriton said he might be there. And some other folks, and the 19th in Boston. So it's a great way. A lot of progressives, I know you watch this and you go, I feel like I'm all alone. I don't know why this all sounds crazy. You show up alone to a Progressive Comedy Tour show, and you will leave as a member of your local community, and you will meet people like Jeff and others from the DSA and Movement for a People's Party and these other organizations that come out to our shows, and they hand out flyers. We do a big meet and greet afterwards. We take photos, we do all that stuff, and we hang out, and we want you to get involved. So join us on the road. Jeff, I look forward to meeting you in person and not just talking to you via cameras. And,
Me too. Me too.
And where can people follow you online and get more information from you?
I'll answer that. I want to thank you, because what is outside of my family and work, what is most important to me is to introduce this to as many people as I possibly can. And the way that I do that, the way that my own person who introduced me, whose name is also Jeff, we do that through people like you who have the voice of other people, have the ears of other people. So I'm grateful for you allowing me to have that voice. People can get in touch with me. I am Citizens Media TV on Twitter. And my pinned tweet, the first tweet in that, is a great resource to get started. Lots of expert sources, lots of really good stuff in there. My pinned tweet, Citizens Media TV on Twitter, and also on Facebook. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you so much. And everybody out there watching, thank you for supporting the show. Like, subscribe, share these videos, watch the ads all the way through. When you click skip ad, I don't get paid. Support me on the Patreon. Go visit me on the road, and GrahamElwood.com for all your tour dates. Thanks for watching.